So the question becomes, after a youth act, whether I have a criminal conviction or whether I have to report this. And this is an issue that comes about quite often. And so this little presentation, very brief, is just talking about your conviction after a youth act, or what happens after a judge grants a youth act sentence, and what happens to that conviction. So you just received an order that the conviction has been vacated. What does that mean? We're going to kind of go through that. First and foremost, you do not have a criminal record. That vacating means to get rid of. That word vacating means that you do not have a criminal record. It has vacated the conviction. There is no conviction. You are as if you hadn't. The incident happened, but the conviction did not. So what does a criminal record mean? When we refer to a criminal record, that's referring to a conviction. When someone says to you, do you have a criminal record? That is referring to a conviction. And a conviction is simply a formal declaration that someone is guilty of a criminal offense made by a verdict of a jury or by the decision in a court of law. So in the case, you may have gone to trial and by a judge or a jury, they found you guilty, or you may have just gone in open court and admitted guilt. I don't know. It depends on the situation which you're in. But that is a conviction. That means that it's a formal declaration. It's very formal. It means that a judge, a jury, somebody said he is guilty of those charges. As to, do I still have an arrest record on my record even though I was given a youth act sentence? So the question is, do you have an arrest record on your sentence? And that is a little more complicated to answer, but the reality is, yes, you probably have the arrest. But remember, an arrest is different than a conviction. An arrest is not a conviction. Arrest simply means that an officer took you into custody and they documented it that they arrested you. That's all it is. They document it somewhere in their file. It may be at the police station that you were arrested. But remember, an arrest is not a conviction, so it cannot be used against you generally. I get it. Sometimes it is used against people. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. But for the most part, an arrest is not a conviction. So the mere fact is, do you have to report an arrest? And I'm going to tell you right off the bat that in DC, you would not have to report an arrest. So can employers ask about convictions? Yes. Employers, jobs, you're applying for jobs, they have the right to ask whether they may ask whether you've been convicted of a charge. So yes, employers may ask whether you have been convicted of a charge, whether it's a drinking in public or it's a murder one. They can ask you whether you've been convicted. Remember, a conviction is a formal declaration of guilt, and they have the right to ask about that. Can they ask about your arrest? Generally, no. They cannot ask you about your arrest because, remember, an arrest is simply a police officer decision to take you into custody, and it's just been documented. And in D.C., we have something called the Fair Criminal Records Screening Amendment Act of 2014. It imposed new obligations on employers. It's also referred to as ban the box. This is something new, and you'll hear about it called ban the box. They are not trying to have arrest hold things against people. And so the employer should not be permitted to ask you about an arrest, and that's why it's called ban the box. And then you say, well, what state does it matter? Can they ask me in different states? So this is not an exhaustive list, but here's a list of states that are, in fact, that have banned the box. These states have said, we're not asking about arrest. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to ask somebody about an arrest. And these are just some of the states. You can see on our borders, we have Virginia and we have Maryland. They both have banned the box, not asking about arrest. So I know that's a lot. I know it was quick. Try to keep these things under 5 minutes. But if you have questions, you can always call us or to discuss it in the future. All right. I hope that helps, because I know this is a question that we routinely get after someone gets an order from the court vacating the conviction from a youth act, or they pled guilty and they got a youth act sentence and they're like, hey, I just want to know what this really means at the end of the day. What does that really mean? So the next question becomes, can I seal my arrest record after the conviction has been vacated by the youth act? And the short answer to that is yes. You can seal the arrest record after a youth act sentence. you don't necessarily have to, because as you remember, ban the box, you don't have to necessarily do that because employers shouldn't be asking you that question in the first place. But you can seal your arrest after a UFAC sentence. However, you will have to wait the statutory time, which is usually 4 years for a felony and 2 years for misdemeanors. So that means that you'd have to wait to file a motion with the court to actually seal that actual arrest. And you'd have to wait 4 years from the final disposition date. You'd have to wait 4 years from the final disposition date of that order, or 2 years if it was a misdemeanor. Why would you want to seal that arrest? I know that comes a question, but that really is a personal choice. And the reason that most people say is that they want a court order saying that they've never been arrested without committing perjury. So let's say you are out at a function and someone asks you, have you ever been arrested? You could say, no, I've never been arrested, because you'd have a court order that says that you are allowed to answer the question, have you ever been arrested? And you can answer that question no, because you'd have a court order saying that you can answer that question no without committing perjury. There are some exceptions to that. I'm not going to go into that today, but that's essentially why you would want to seal that court order. All right, hope that helps. Thanks.